Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I am so excited to have physician, psychologist, and consciousness researcher, Dr. Howard Eisenberg, with us today. Dr. Eisenberg, welcome.
Thank you, Supatra. Thank you for your interest. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I'm going to read a little bit about Howard, and then we're going to get right into our questions. It's okay if I call you Howard, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Dr. Howard Eisenberg is a distinguished physician, psychologist, and consciousness researcher whose career spans over 5 decades. He has served as a lecturer at the University of Toronto and as an associate professor of medicine at the University of Vermont. Dr. Eisenberg is the CEO of Syntrek, Inc., an international consultancy specializing in stress management, creative thinking, and executive coaching for Fortune 100 companies. His pioneering work in parapsychology includes authoring the seminal book Inner Spaces, Parapsychological Explorations of the Mind, which became a textbook for his groundbreaking credit course in parapsychology at the University of Toronto. His latest award-winning book, Dream It to Do It, The Science and the Magic, integrates ancient wisdom with contemporary science to explore the true nature of reality and consciousness. Howard, welcome.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. Thank you again.
Well, you have an amazing background, and I am very interested in all things consciousness. And that's what drew my interest when we were connecting. And so, we always start out on this podcast with a little bit of inspiration. I want to know about your journey. How did you decide, and what made you decide to go into medicine and psychology, and then eventually to branch out into parapsychology?
I welcome your questions. I have to warn you, I can go very wide and very deep.
Good. That's what we like.
And it's not a typical background, but
Yes.
trying to recapitulate in part what you have just asked. I remember in my early childhood, I was naturally or precociously very curious. I wanted to understand things. So in part, what led me to medicine was the deep knowledge I would gain about how we're constructed, how we function. It seemed kind of important. So that was just coming again from curiosity, like, what a wonderful way to really know how we're built, how we function, why sometimes we're not healthy, and what we can do to regain our health, restore our health. The other side of that was a relative mission, to use the word loosely, of helping others, and helping others by educating them. So from, again, a precocious age, I enjoyed not only learning things, but sharing it with others. And parapsychology came on the horizon because, aside from medicine later on, it was just so utterly fascinating to explore the further reaches of consciousness, of reality. And at the time, it was very controversial. It was very difficult to legitimately do research or even talk about it in certain academic circles. But I was young and curious and wanted to be at the leading edge. Okay, but going back to the curiosity. So I got deeply involved at a pretty young age in that. Even as a teenager, I started doing little experiments to test it out, so to speak, as well as finding whatever I could to read. This is obviously pre-internet years. The turning point for me, though, in terms of where I am now, came about just a few years ago. I went on, as you partly have shared in that wonderful introduction, doing many other things. So I had my medical practice, I had an academic career, I was heading up my company Syntrek and working in different countries with all types of industries and different sectors. This was a pretty busy life, and I had left behind for the time the deep interest I first had in terms of curiosity in parapsychology, researching on an extended capacities of our mind, sometimes called properly just ESP, but that's not really a proper term. It's one of the popular consciousness still. But again, a few years ago, I was invited, because of my history, because of that first book, Inner Spaces, Parapsychological Explorations of the Mind, almost half a century ago, somebody who was involved with an organization of healers who do what's called sometimes therapeutic touch, or what biblically was referred to as laying on of hands. There's different terms, or energy medicine, energy psychology. And it was for their annual conference. It would be a keynote presentation. And to do it justice, to honor the invitation, I did a very deep dive into almost half a century of the accumulated research in parapsychology, since I was very hotly involved in it with my book and teaching it at the university, as well as looking at the latest developments in modern physics, usually referred to as quantum mechanics, as well as comparative studies of how different religions understand and envision the world and give us guidance to live the good and healthy life in this world. And even going back before that to the indigenous teachings before they even formalized, as we call the major religions. And then some of the leading research now at the gates have opened for psychedelic research, what we were finding about brain functioning in controlled laboratory studies of psychedelics. The research, too, that was coming out, which was totally evidence-based on neuroplasticity, how our thoughts can rewire our brain. So it's not the brain produces consciousness. Consciousness goes through the brain and can modulate the brain itself physically. So as I'm going through this really deep data dump, and it's deep, I'm only saying a few words, but phenomenal when you think about a half century in all these different fields, deeply. And then one day, Supatra, as I was still formulating my ideas for the upcoming presentation several weeks to come, I had an experience in just a minute or two of time. I wasn't timing it. Totally unexpected. This was an experience, not simply an understanding or realization. Some might even call it a revelation. I suddenly did a total 100-degree flip on my understanding and perception of reality. Again, unexpected. So here I was doing research on the leading edges of consciousness and reality in terms of quantum mechanics and so on, but not expecting this flip, because I was still assuming that the scientific Western understanding of reality being something somewhat fixed out there that has some predictability and some controllability, that was the reality. I wasn't totally convinced that the brain was the source, again, of consciousness, going back to my early interest in parapsychology, but I knew it had a relationship to consciousness. But I still was accepting fundamentally, if you like, that we're in a world of separate beings, separate entities, separate things, objects. So broadly, I was still in that framework and still approaching it scientifically. But with this experience, I suddenly realized all of that, as is described in some of the old yoga texts, is Maya. It's all illusion. Mm. So that was accompanied, this is all very fast, a minute or two, if that.
And describe it a little bit more. What was the realization?
The realization was that everything is coming, everything, from within a deeper level of consciousness. And I'm a connection and expression of that. But there's nothing out there at all. There are no people. There are no things. There is no nature. There is no universe. It's all in here. It's all deeply within us. And it's